So hello and welcome everyone. I'm going to let a few people trail in for a few minutes, but also just let you know a little bit about the Association of Book Publishers of BC and our affiliated programming, Read Local BC. But first, just to check in on all of you, how are you all doing? Has everybody been here? Has anybody been here since like 8:30? Like me and Laura and Joseph and Andrew, Kevin? Okay, so oh my gosh, since 4 a.m. Okay. So it's the time of day where you're feeling like you might need a coffee, but what else gets your energy up but starting to talk about publishing and demystifying the process, which is what we're going to do today. So I'll just introduce myself. My name is Matea Kulich. I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Book Publishers of BC, and I'm here with my colleague, Asna Shaikh, who is our Program Manager. So the association, what we do is we really just advocate for the health of our local book publishing industry. So Poetry in Transit, which we just launched, the poems on the bus that many of you are maybe familiar with, riding on the bus and seeing poems from local BC poets like Kevin here in the front row and many others in the audience. We do catalogs each year for librarians and teachers, and we also have a campaign, Read Local BC, which is about sharing BC bestsellers, but also just profiles of BC book publishers, BC authors, their latest titles, and getting into conversations with poets, with fiction and nonfiction writers. And actually our moderator today is one of the interviewers that we often have on our site. So I'm going to ask Asna to pass around a clipboard. We have a newsletter sign up so that if you're not familiar with the campaign, you can put your name and email there and you can tick off if you'd like to be aware of the BC bestseller list, if you'd like to receive interviews and just information about local events and things that are happening when authors are launching their books. So it's a great pleasure for me to welcome 4 BC authors here today, as well as our moderator, who is himself an award-winning BC author. And I'll introduce you to Rob Taylor. Rob Taylor is the author of 3 poetry collections, including The News, which was published by Gaspereau Press in 2016. And it was also a finalist for the 2017 Dorothy Livesay Poetry Prize. He is also the editor of What the Poets Are Doing, Canadian Poets in Conversation, published by Nightwood Editions in 2018. In 2015, Rob received the City of Vancouver Mayor's Arts Award for the literary arts, and he lives in Port Moody with his wife and son, it says here, but I think 2.
We've established it's a dated.
It's a dated bio because we've got 2 little ones here.
I have more book babies and human babies.
Okay.
They're in the second row there, yeah, if you need.
So please join me in welcoming Rob, and also our 4 authors who Rob will now also introduce. Enjoy.
Thank you so much, Matea. It's really amazing what the association has been doing on their website through Poetry in Transit, all the different activities that happen. Ghosts just came in. That they do, and this is another example of that, and I'm just so pleased to have been invited to the ghost doors. I'm going to get used to the ghost doors in a second. To be able to be here to bring you this conversation on publishing in demystifying the publishing process. I loved how in my intro, I like how you say 218. It made me feel 1,800 years old and strong and virile. So first off, I want to note that in addition to this being a conversation between our 4 authors about the publishing process, 2 of our authors, all of our authors and editors do have very recently released books out, and those books are available from Iron Dog bookseller, which is just outside, I believe. And I want to start, before we dive into this all, by acknowledging the territory that we're on, which is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Word Vancouver would also like to thank their sponsors. There's a very long list of them. If we all agree that I said all of them when I only say a selection, are we all good with that? If there's like a survey on the way out? Okay, here's a few of their sponsors. the Canadian Book Fund, the BC Arts Council, the BC and Yukon Book Prizes, which happened last night. This is a real celebratory weekend all around. The Federation of BC Writers, the Surrey Library, the League of Canadian Poets, the Writers Union of Canada, and the Vines Festival, and many more. There, the many more covered all the ones I skipped. Without these sponsors, this free festival could not happen. If you haven't already, please consider making a donation via the Word website, or you can support the festival online through our silent auction at wordvancouver.com. I'm now going to introduce our panelists. And we will have run out of time after we're done all the introductions, but it'll be fun. No, we're going to get there. First up, we have Julie Burtinshaw. Julie is a resident of Vancouver. Maybe a wave, yeah, there we go. Is an award-winning author of 7 novels for young adults. She's a graduate of the Writers Studio, and Julie has served as a judge on the BC Book Prizes, the Red Cedar Awards, the Illinois Women's Press Association Communications. Hangman, the true story of Canada's first executioner from Tidewater Press, is her first book of Canadian nonfiction. And there it is. How long have you been able to hold it in your hands? Yesterday. So this is very exciting. To Julie's right, we have Andrew Chesham, who is the director of the Writers Studio at Simon Fraser University. You guys have to come in on the weekend to your office.
Yeah, but we love it. It's fine.
They work just upstairs. He has worked in the literary arts scene since 2006 as a writer, editor, publisher, and educator in Canada and Australia. He's also edited the anthologies From the Earth to the Table and Stories for a Long Summer, Catchfire Press. And really the book that all of this conversation is circling around, which wasn't in there, is Resonance, which is the anthology that Andrew and Laura, who I'll introduce next, have edited and released, that is essays on, I'll let them talk about it more, but essays on the writing and publishing process. Laura, Andrew's fellow editor, is next up. I don't have to reach as far to gesture to the person now. Laura is the author of 2 collections of poetry and a picture book. She has facilitated writing workshops in schools and community settings across Canada and the United States. She is currently the coordinator of the Writers Studio at Simon Fraser University. And then immediately, it's very easy for me to gesture towards, is Joseph Kakwinokanasum, who's a member of the James Smith Cree Nation, who grew up in the Peace region of northern BC, one of 7 children raised by a single mother. If you notice that sweat is pouring over my whole body today, it's because I was looking after 2 children on my own today. So that amazes me. I almost died before I even got here just dealing with that. So that's very impressive of your mother. A graduate of SFU's Writers Studio, his short story, Ray Says, was a finalist for the CBC's 2020 Nonfiction Prize. His work has appeared in the Humber Literary Review and in the aforementioned Resonance Essays on the Craft and Life of Writing. In 2022, he was selected by Darrell J. McLeod as one of the Writers' Trust of Canada's rising stars. He now lives and writes on Vancouver Island. Loosely based on his own childhood, My Indian Summer, which came out, oh, here we go, yes, book display, which came up from Tidewater Press in 2022, also is his first novel. And how long have you been able to hold it in your hands?
The ARC. So I've had this for about a month now, but the revised, finished version I have not yet held yet.
Oh, we're in the future. Were you serious? Is this happening? Oh, it's at the bookseller. You gotta go check it out. You beat him to his own book. So as I said, our conversation today is about demystifying the publishing process. What that means is we're hoping for a good amount of audience participation. If you have questions about the publishing process, we're not going to be talking in depth about the individual books. We're going to be talking about the process of these books coming into being and how any questions you might have for the similar process for yourself, or if you're just curious about how the heck a book gets made, then you're in the right place. If that isn't the right place, you can sneak out quietly out the back, or these ghost doors open sporadically and you can just sneak out one of them. But to start, I would like to kind of give these people a chance to talk because I've talked long enough, and to give us, as a form of kind of introduction, we've met your books a little bit, but I'd love you to talk about the how of how your book came into being. so how, and the main one things I'm wondering about is kind of how long did it take you to go from that original idea to the published book? And what were kind of the big ups or downs? Was it a smooth process? Was it very much not a smooth process? Someone feel, oh, Laura
I'll
looks like
start it
she
off,
wants
'cause
to
it's
go
all-
first.
Yeah, it started down that end and made its way here. So it's fine. I'll start it off because I'll look like the foolish one, and then you guys will look great when it gets to you. So for Resonance, which Laura and I co-edited, we were doing the math. It came out April of 2022, so this year, and we first had the idea in 2019, like the fall of 2019, and we shopped it around, and Anvil Press picked it up. An idea of a collection of essays on the craft and life of writing. For what we do in the studio every day, we're often talking about how people get their words out into the world and how people can dedicate their time to sitting at the page, getting it to a publisher, getting it edited, and finally getting it to a reading audience. And so we found that the ideas or the conversations we were having in isolation or like one-on-one with people, we wanted to bring them together to present to a wider audience, because we're like, well, this is helpful for us and this individual that we're talking to, but we really want more people to know what it's like to deal with writer's block, or like how you come up with ideas, or what it's like to, like, what are good things to do at a reading or at like a public function. And so it was bringing together those, and like the nuts and bolts of it is, and did we agree on 2 years? Took about 2 years from like idea, pitching it to Anvil, and the pandemic, and coming out here today. Is that a good answer?
It's good. I mean, 2 years and you didn't actually do most of the writing. That's the.
Oh yeah,
That's the thing.
I feel, yeah, the back and forth, yeah, because there's 42 authors in here. Yeah, there was a lot of back and forth with individuals on their piece and developing their writing, and you're in it. And yeah, developing the piece, bringing out like there'd be something somebody touches on, but they only glance over that idea and be like, oh, can we talk more about that? Because I think that is really important. So yeah.
Great. Julie.
Thank you. I'm sort of embarrassed to say that the idea for this book was a long time ago. It was 2015. So we're looking at 6 or 7 years. But this was, I had finished a YA novel. And after I finish a book, I always have this kind of moment of panic that I'll never have another idea. Like it's a constant. I wake up, hey, here's the book. I'll never have another idea of my last book. So I've learned to sort of open up to just listening. Like listening for like a little spark of an idea. So I had finished that book. I had plans for another book. And then I was lying in bed one morning listening to CBC, literally half asleep. And I heard the announcer say, Canada's first official hangman. And then I thought, God, I should write this down on my phone or I'll forget, which happens all the time. I didn't write it down on my phone, but those words sort of stuck with me. So in the meantime, I was finishing another book, but I was slowly kind of just researching. And I found out that there were post-Confederation, that there were 767 people who were hanged in Canada. And 13 of those were women. And the majority of those women were hanged for murdering their husbands. But the husbands were all abusive. And the law in Canada at the time said that if a husband murders his wife, it's probably because she needed a bit of a slap around and he maybe went overboard. But in the opposite way, women were always convicted to death if they killed their husband and were caught. So all of this was just in the background. I had another book come out. I continued to take notes and write little bits about the women who were hanged. And the more I wrote, literally, the more bored I got. So it's like, I can't do this for 4 years. It's going to be horrible. And the more I researched, I kind of started to really like this hangman. Like he was such a conflicted person. He was really good. He was really evil. He had great intentions. He had ambition, and all of that would, of course, kill him in the end because of the life he did. So I put it down again. In the end, I'll talk too much. There were 5 titles for this book, 5 full working titles, 5 full drafts. And finally, it was published. I've got it yesterday, so it's a long time. It's a long story.
I feel like Andrew kind of answered for me. It was the same book. It was the same process. I'll add that one of the most exciting parts of putting the book together was we sort of reached out to a whole lot of writers we knew and admired and wanted to learn from. And then the process of getting those and asked if they would be interested in writing essays. And most of them said yes, some of them said no. And the process of getting those essays back and reading them was, for me, the most exciting part, because people said such interesting and unique and wonderful things. And I think the essays were like so much more than we thought they were. And that, I think, is the fun of collaborating with people and putting together an anthology.
Really.
Thanks.
You know, that you guys did it actually in 2 years was phenomenal, and under the conditions that you guys were working on it. Like, I remember working with you guys on this and my essay, and you know, you guys did a fantastic job. Yeah, so fantastic editors. Anyways, okay, so my book, I think 2016. It started off as a 1,500 word story in 2016. I think it was 2016, and you worked on it with my mother-in-law. And then about a year later, I shopped it with or mentor read it with Betsy Warland, you know, through the TWS. And then she recommended the TWS. And then I submitted it. And then I got in. And then met JJ, met all you guys. And then about 2 years after that, so I think it was about a 5-year process. You know, I don't know how many drafts, 10, 15 drafts, something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Is that about right? Yeah.
So yeah, that's great. That's great. One theme I'm hearing, and I'm curious, Joe, for you, is kind of that the book you set out to write or edit is not necessarily the book that you end up with. Did you find that, or did you,
That's
or
what
did you?
for.
Was the vision you had in 2016 what you followed? You arrived at?
It started off as memoir, and it was 44,000 words of really painful stuff. And then I thought, I don't want to write this anymore. And so then when I got the deal with Tidewater in 2021, my publisher said, well, let's change it to fiction. And so we did, and it made it so much easier. I got to get inside other characters' heads. I didn't have to be this traumatized writer. I didn't have to be as guarded. And so there was a lot more freedom in that process. So yeah, it's a completely different story now. Yeah.
Well, I think you're sensing themes already. It's going to take you a long time, and it's not going to be what you planned on it being. We're gonna leave. People are gonna be so inspired and pumped up for the long, difficult, complicated haul. Tied to that, I mean, the one thing that unites everybody here is some sort of involvement with the Writers Studio. And I was wanting to ask Julie and Joe, not necessarily about the Writers Studio itself, but when we talk about creative writing programs, or we think about doing creative writing, whatever that means, we usually think about the writing process, the craft of writing and improving your writing. But I'm curious, as we're here talking about publishing, how studying and being involved in that creative writing world prepared you for the publishing process. I'm wondering, if you could just talk about how formal study of writing kind of assisted you in some way.
Okay.
In preparing for
maybe that's a tougher question, because this was like now number 9 book.
Yeah.
What I would say to people is that it would probably be better to know about the publishing process before you get into it. I'm just not sure, like for me, if that's an important part of writing. And I have lots of friends right now who are doing MFAs all over Canada. And there's a real complaint about the business side of writing is overtaking the writing side. So how do you, it's kind of almost for traditional or non-traditional publishers in a way. So I did learn some interesting things in the publishing process part of our units that were interesting, but it wasn't the part that grabbed me. And that said, I know that for people who were like coming in it from the very beginning, I think if you learn about the publishing process from day one, you probably quit.
Yeah. If you're new, you've made a big mistake coming here. Leave immediately. No, there's some truth there, though, for sure. It can seem much more daunting than when you stumble step by step through it blindly, not knowing what you've got yourself into.
10 months. And at the end of that 10 months, my book will be published. And as a nice, already published person, you'd be like, yeah, that's good planning there.
Don't crush the dreams immediately. Yeah.
So the question is how did publishing or how did education, the courses, the teaching, prepare us for publishing?
Yeah.
I think for me, anyways, personally, the TWS, all of the courses that I took prior to TWS, it taught me how to accept rejection. Because like you're young, you're just figuring out how to write. There's all that. There was a huge learning curve for me, because I didn't go to school in a kind of a traditional way that most people did. So learning English for me was almost like I had to start from scratch. And so getting rejected because your writing is so bad, your teacher can't read your cursive, and failing miserably at that. But then having people say, okay, well, this is what you're doing wrong. This is what you're doing wrong. This is what you're doing wrong. You hear it a lot. I heard it a lot. So I just got used to it. It's thickened and toughened my skin, and that's what it did for me. It just prepared me for that ultimate rejection from the publisher, because 99% of the time you're going to get rejected. So, so yeah, so that's what it did for me.
The greatest part of the publishing unit was the fact that we all got to submit our work to a magazine, have it heavily edited, and see it published. Like the Emerge publishing part, that was learning by experience, and it was fabulous for anyone, no matter what their level. Thanks to you guys.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll transition to you guys for when you're thinking about the program that you have. And I think Julie set it up well in this sense that, well, you both did, how valuable it is to learn about this and to prepare for rejection and to prepare for the rigors of the publishing process, but also how to introduce that in the process so that we don't put the cart before the horse. We still are working on craft and all that. Could you guys talk a little about the balance at the Writer Studio you try to strike so that you can kind of do both of those without one extinguishing the other? Or
I can try. I think that for me, and maybe I think for me, the writing is the most important part. You can't publish something if you haven't written it. But sometimes the writing is really hard, and I think that like endlessly researching how to write a query letter on the internet, for example, that's quite easy. You just type that into Google. And so I think you can kind of go down this rabbit hole where that whole publishing process seems much more complicated than it actually is, because it's a great way to procrastinate. Like you kind of feel like you're working on writing. So I feel like I think one of the things that I like about the Writer Studio is that it's the very last thing we talk about in the studio is how to go about writing a query letter, submitting to publishers, getting an agent, that kind of thing. And it's not that people are necessarily at that part of things when they get to that part of the program, but I think it's sort of to signify that everything comes before that you have to write something that you're proud of first, and that the real work of writing is in that, and is in the writing, and the other stuff you can just learn it. It's
I think maybe the context I'll provide is that we're talking about Emerge. Emerge is the annual publication that we do in the studio where we publish the students writing from that year or those current cohorts. And we see Emerge as an opportunity for the students in the program to show people what they work on, what they've been working on, and what they've been developing. In the production of Emerge, in my head, I'm like, oh, it's a new process, but it's not a new process. About 10 years ago, we revamped it so that the students would work with editors and have their writing go through a very similar process that it would go through once they left the studio. So we wanted to give them an idea of what it was like for their work to leave their hands, have someone else touch it, and have someone else have their own ideas or suggestions around what could be done around with that writing, and then go to the final design and production stages. But we were really trying to separate the student, like higher level, like to show the student, we talk about you are not your writing, you're getting feedback on your writing. Everybody's trying to make this the best thing for the world to read, and we're going to have you go through that process so that when you sign up with Tidewater, Anvil, or whoever your publisher is, you'll understand what the editor is doing in that house. That conceptually, that's what we were trying to do with that process. Was there a separate part to your question? I was just adding context. Oh,
No,
how do
that's
we not?
Oh yeah, go for it.
No.
What?
No, I don't have it.
Wait,
There
you?
go.
No, wait. Huh? No, if you had something to say it.
No. I was thinking how we not flattening things, how we keeping it to the writing workshop. Not trying to make this about TWS, but workshopping happens throughout the program. Students are writing throughout the program. So even when they're going through the publishing modules, or they're going through the publishing process of eMerge, every 2 weeks it's going to come back to your workshop group and you producing ideally new writing to get feedback on. So ideally when you leave the program, whether you're putting something new out into the world and going through that process, you're either thinking about or developing or being in the headspace of words or writing or page.
Yeah. That's a great point about workshopping. For anyone who's new to writing or creative writing programs, it's just where you share a piece of work and a bunch of people, your peers around the room, give their feedback on how to improve that. They think they might improve that work. It can be a wonderful, it can be a horrifying experience. But I think what everyone's saying is that I think it is also very helpful for the publishing experience, because you get to see the range of opinions that can exist on an individual text. And I think when you're writing something in isolation, and then you just send it off to a publisher and you get a rejection, if you don't go through these processes to realize, oh, someone might just see this thing in a very different way. It's not that it's bad, it's that it's not the right editor, it's not the right, building up that metal as you improve the writing as well is one of the really beneficial spin-offs, I think, of those kinds of programs. I'm going to ask one more question and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. So if you have one, start drafting it in your mind. I will emphasize, if your question begins, this is more of a comment, I'm cutting off your mic. So find a way to put a question mark at the end of your question. They're not going to have a mic, I don't think. I'm just going to shout. I'll get Kevin to stand up and shout until they stop. So my other question was specifically for the Resonance Anthology, because one thing that I really loved about this anthology, in keeping with what we're saying, is that you invited, I think it's 4 or 5 publishers, to contribute as part of this. So normally you see writing anthologies and they're about how to write, and they're a bunch of, if it's poets, it's all poets, and if it's fiction, it's writers, it's all fiction writers. But in this case, they included publishers who aren't, in many cases at least, aren't themselves regularly publishing authors. Their one thing they do is publish and design books. And I thought that was a really unique addition, and it was in keeping with what's happening here. So I was just curious, for the two of you, if you want to add in, if you read something in Resonance that you wanted to add in there, but especially for the editors here, if there was something that even for you who've done so much of this that was kind of eye-opening, that made you think freshly about the publishing process from what those publishers had to say in Resonance.
What I can start off by saying is that, like, the initial idea for having publishers in the anthology, like generally as you craft-based books or process-based books or writing life books, or just focus on the writer and focus on, getting your work into the world. And I've worked with publishers over the years, and when we're talking to writers about working with a publisher, it feels like they're like publishers are put up here in a specific level, and that you're just trying to figure out what they want, and you're just trying to please them, and just do the right things at the right time to make them happy, and so that they'll say yes to your book. And it just feels like this code that you're trying to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And so knowing a lot of publishers, we were like, well, they're just people too. and they have fears and worries and things that they're trying to achieve in their house and in their life and in with the work that they're putting out in the world. And so to humanize publishers, we just wanted to give them an opportunity to say some things in their own words. And I'll leave that there because hopefully I haven't said everything that you want to say.
Yeah, no, and I feel like we asked them the question we put to publishers was, what do you wish that writers knew, like that maybe they don't know. And I think one of the ones that really struck me, Andrew Steves, who's the publisher of Gasbro Press, wrote this lovely essay in these little bits, and it's just sort of all his thoughts on publishing. But one of the things he said was he was talking about books as community building endeavors, and that when you put a book out into the world, a community forms around the book. And that is sort of his reason for publishing. And I mean, it was one of those things where you hear it and I was like, oh, of course, because like, why do we all join book clubs if we don't want to have a community around books? But having it put that way, I'd never heard it put that way before, and it really struck me as a beautiful reason for doing what he does.
Yeah, I love that's like the essay. That's one of those essays that's worth the cover price by itself. You know, like it's such a wonderful essay that he wrote. I'm going to open up to the audience, but does anyone else want to add anything along these lines before I open things up? All right. Does anyone have a question they would like to ask? Go right now. I can bring you a mic, or if you think you can project, I will let you just do it from there. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, you're good. Yes. Yes. Thank you. How did you find the right sending out spies out there?
I sent out my spies. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I got a really good spy on my side. His name is JJ Lee. Yeah. JJ sometimes, you know, if he has faith in something, if he sees something and he knows there's something there, he will go out of his way to suggest, recommend. And since TWS 2018, I'd made a point of getting his home phone number, you know, finding out where he lived, you know, following him home on the SkyTrain station. I was one car over, just watching him through that window. And yeah, and we became really good friends. Fortunately, it wasn't weird at all. But yeah, that's how it happened for me. And just one day I got a phone call. He called me up. He said, you know, stay by the phone 3 days. Don't move. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna stay by the phone 3 days. And 3 days later, you know, I got a phone call, and it was Tidewater Press, and they said, hey, we read your manuscript. We really like the idea, so let's completely change it.
So get some incriminating evidence against JJ Lee is how you publish. I'm glad we worked that out. Julie, do you want
to? One of the things, well, I think the main thing is that you have to be you have a hard shell against rejection. Basically, if someone rejects them, you know they have terrible taste and you won't ever approach them again. And I mean, I've had so many rejections over time, and it was reiterated in our studio. You have to be tough. I mean, it's one person's opinion, and your writing could be, I think in the last panel, someone said, even if one person loves it, it's good writing. So you have to go with belief in yourself. And sometimes it's like you have to paper the walls with publishers. And then I have a pile of what I call really good rejection letters. And the other ones I just throw out. Right? It's just patience. You have to really, it's tough to believe in yourself like that. It really is. And then you do have to be prepared, as Joseph said, that they'll, we love your book. We'll take it, but let's change it completely. So you've got to be tough about your skill and your craft. It's not easy, which is why our workshops were so great, because, you hand in something on a Saturday, you think it's the best thing you've ever written. Your cohort says it's not. You learn to listen to them, and then you see in the end, my God, sometimes it's really good to listen to when people criticize you instead of letting your ego get in the way. So it's my advice: believe in yourself. Just keep sending it out. Contests are a great way to get a first piece published, for sure. There's lots of literary contests.
Andrew, Laura?
I think also just I mean, we did it sort of the traditional way. We wrote a query letter. We sent it to some publishers that we liked. But I also think that in the vein of publishers are people too, publishers are people too. And so we did. I mean, we have had Brian Kaufman, who's the publisher of Anvil Press, in to talk to students, and we knew him a little bit. And so I think when our letter crossed his desk, he knew that we were serious and that we would edit a good anthology. Yeah.
And I got to tell you, like, I mean, as far as like, like for preparing myself for that publishing process, like, I mean, just working on that one essay with you guys back and forth, it was a really good learning experience, and it did prepare me a little bit more for the Tidewater, that wave of.
Let's just keep tossing them back and forth. That's wonderful. I will say it is wonderful to take a creative writing program. It is not necessary for the process unless you need JJ Lee to hook you up. Then you probably should take JJ's class, I think. But I like these two did not. It was not through a program, and none of my books have been because of that kind of thing either. My only thing I'd add is just to read, to find out what your match is. You just have to read really widely, right? You have to be sampling all these different presses, and then when you find someone that you think, oh, maybe there's something there, then you go deep and you read a few. And I've never written a querying or cover letter that didn't have like, here are 3 or 4 books that your press writes that I think are in keeping with what I'm doing, and this is why I think it all lines up. And if I can't do that, then I'm not going to send something to someone because I haven't done my homework. You know what I mean? But if I've done that homework, then I want it so badly. It's such a perfect match. I have one out right now that is that. It's like, I tried not to say too much. If you don't take this, then I can't imagine anyone else I could ever. I've fallen so in love with this idea, but I feel like you do need to try to get to, push yourself a little bit in that sense. Find nice matches for yourself, and then it's more likely to work out too, because you're not just, anyway.
Can I would just add to that?
Go for it.
Like the people talk a lot about the writing community, and it is a community. And I think if you put yourself out there in the community and you go to readings and you go to launches and you're at events, then you start to meet people who are also involved in the publishing side of things. And then you're not just a random name.
Yeah. It's extremely valuable.
No, I just want to underscore how important the point you're making. Being in community is huge. Knowing the community is equally as important. Like, if there's a book you're writing, like when we're looking at this, we're like, well, who else is putting out anthologies on writing, or who put out anthologies? So we're looking at publishers who are putting out collections in similar veins, and we would approach those publishers and we'd be like, yeah, this is the exact book you need, but you didn't know you need. And we were so confident sending it out. But then when they would come back and say, well, actually, we don't need that, we'd be like, are you sure? Are you sure? Did you read the whole letter? Like, but have a look at who's writing the things or who's publishing the things that you like reading. And that's your first lead into like the right spot.
Getting yourself published in an anthology or a magazine can also have spin-off effects as well, because as soon as Resonance was published, 2 months later, I got another request for to write a book. So, it was Brian. So yeah. So groovy.
That's fine. Anyone else have a question? Oh, yep. Go for it. Would you like the mic? Oh, you're good. Mhm. I mean, I'm a poet. There's no agents at all, so I will definitely not answer it to start. But I'll leave that to someone else to.
Also a poet.
Wish I was a poet.
You wouldn't have to deal with agents.
Sorry, what was the question? Oh, agents. In Canada, I found that you don't really need an agent, but if in the UK, right, or America, places like that, many of the big publishers, and they are usually bigger, won't see you without an agent. I've only ever published with Canadian publishers. I did have an agent once for one of my books, and I think that they did a great job of getting a bit higher advance, but then they took 15% all through that book's life. So, I mean, I feel like if I was trying for bigger markets, it would probably be wise to get an agent. And the other thing is, I think publishers, if they like you and your letter and your what you were talking about, your belief, they want you. They want to help you out. But yeah, so I would say it's really tough to get an agent probably in Canada, but depends what your topic is. I mean, if you're doing like a regional history book, you probably don't need an agent. But if you're doing a world international story that you want to float everywhere, probably better, right?
Yeah, when we're talking about demystifying the publishing process, I think that's one of the things that we try to clarify. The first thing we tell people or students is go to your bookshelf, like I said, see who's writing in the area that you're writing, see who's publishing that writing, and then go to that publisher's website. They will generally have submission guidelines. They will tell you if they need an agent or if they accept unsolicited manuscripts. I don't know if it's a U.S. America thing or U.S. Canada thing, but the larger houses, yeah, you'll generally need an agent. The smaller houses, you don't often need an agent. And so the first step is go to the submission guidelines. And yeah, I sort of just forgot the second part I was going to say, but yeah, so I'll just end it there. Yeah.
Yeah, Tidewater wouldn't work with me if I did have an agent. And it's a small press, so it's a good thing you don't have an agent because we wouldn't have signed with you. And it was after I'd signed with Tidewater and the book was coming out that I got a phone call from an agent who wanted to represent me. So, so I'm represented by Carolyn Ford of Transatlantic Agency. So yeah, she's a very nice lady. I know she's representing a couple of my friends, Daryl J. McLeod and Phil Fontaine, a couple of other Indigenous writers. So yeah, I don't know. I got lucky. I got really lucky. That's all it is, just luck.
It might be a
Yeah,
little
there
bit.
was a second half to the question. If we're oh,
I don't think that could hurt you.
no.
No.
No, so is the question like if you know a publisher or if you know an author within a house, is it acceptable or is it common practice for that author to say to their publisher, hey, this person's great, you should check them out? Is that the vibe of the question? Yeah, I think there are two parts. If you feel close enough to the writer that you would say, hey, do you mind lending a good word? And the second part being then that they feel comfortable with you as you're writing maybe, or with their relationship with the publisher to be like, hey, check this person out. Then I think, yeah, those things do happen. I don't think there's a hard, fast or no to do you do it or don't you do it. It's all about vibing relationships and what you think, what people think would be a good fit.
I had a relationship with Daryl J. McLeod, who was already represented by my agent now. So I think that had a lot to do with it as well. So knowing that writer and 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 just being associated with him, just pals, like we go out for coffee every now and again. He might have said something, yeah, he's a pretty good writer, whatever, like, sign him up to, eh, I don't know. You're a poet, so
Doesn't come up.
Sorry, I'll add this one thing to the vibing of relationships. I've been in the position where I'm like, oh, you work with this publisher. Would you feel interested in introducing me or like making a connection? And I got a very opaque answer of, well, sometimes people are just looking to move their own projects forward. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's a no. You don't want to introduce me to this person because you don't think this project is right for it, or you want to do your own thing. So I think if you ask people, generally they'll be honest, and their answer will indicate like where things stand. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's been my experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, it can be an awkward situation to put someone in that ask. I would say a thing that I've never done that, but the thing I have done that's similar to that is if there's someone who's had a book published at a press, I just call them up and pick their brain about how does this press operate? When I write my query letter, how can I frame it that's going to actually interest them based on the conversations they've had with the publisher? And I think that is just a way to show that you can magically look in sync with the publisher without ever having talked to them, right? And that I think has it's like a no awkwardness, no harm kind of angle at the same issue, without.
And I think that's a really good practice too, just in terms of whether that publisher is a good
Yeah.
fit for you in terms of like their expectations for marketing or their
Mhm.
like the way they design their books, the way they edit their books. It can be helpful for you as well.
I know what I like to do is if I sign a book with a publisher is phone, like literally contact one of their authors and say, what's your experience with everything, with like marking, with marketing, with editing, all of it. Has it been overall good or bad? Because as exciting as it is to get a book signed, there's nothing worse than having it signed and find out that you and the publisher just aren't a fit, right? So I think other writers they're your best networking. They know about the contests. They know about what people are looking for, submissions, new publishers. I mean, networking is hard for us because we're kind of loners in a room with a computer. And other writers get that. So they'll be your best friends, right, through the process.
For sure. Do we have other questions? We've completely demystified the publishing process. Just
Oh,
like that.
so quickly too.
That's it. There's no more. Yeah, go for it. Mm-hmm. I wish Jen Sukfang Lee was here. She's got great, because she's gone through a whole journey with that. And Julie, you have too a little bit because you had an agent and all that jazz, and so maybe you want to start us off.
Oh, well, I mean, I think that the small publishers, you kind of feel like you have a team leader who you can call with anything good or bad. It's kind of like a counselor almost, actually. They're always there. They always answer the phone. The passion they bring to the project, because maybe they only have 2 or 3 or 4 books a year, it feels like it equals yours, doesn't it? Yeah. I don't know. The big publishers have 1 or 2 big advantages. One is they have money. So you get more money up front. Royalties are negotiable, so that doesn't make a difference. But they do have more luck with shelf placement of your books. The whole marketing thing. They have teams that go across the world. And it's tougher for the little publishers to even market their books outside of sometimes their region. And there's there's no big book tours or champagne or anything, but you do feel that you've got someone truly on side, right?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, and thank you for bringing up that question, bringing it back to the like the independent publishers or the small to medium-sized publishers. I've worked for small publishers, and what I love about small houses, like ones that are doing like 2 or 3 or 4 titles a year, is that there's a lot more opportunities for the author to be involved in the process. Like I haven't published at Penguin Random House or worked at Penguin Random House, but when I've talked to authors who've gone from small independent presses to larger houses, it uh, it can be a process of there are conversations that you're not going to be a part of when you're part of a bigger house. And so you may have, at a smaller house, you may have input into the cover art. You may have input into some decisions that are being made in-house. But one author I'm thinking of specifically, they're like, yeah, at this small house, I got to be a part of the design process. When I got my my US publisher, the big US publisher, I was told this is what your cover looks like. This. You have more opportunity in a smaller house to form a relationship or be a part of a team. The resources are obviously not the same as a larger publisher, but they really are invested in your book, especially if you're making up 50% or 25 or 50% of their front list that season. You're the one of the 4 or one of the 2 books that they're publishing that season.
Yeah, and the other great thing is with a small publisher, they do offer about a 15-month shelf life for your book. And a small publisher's, I mean, a big publisher's 4 to 6 months, make it or break it. And then it goes into the back of the bookstore. So they need, you're right, it's about them, their income, but they're passionate with your book, I think. And they have great suggestions and lots more time. You have the same editor all the way through. Like in the bigger houses, you might get 3 or 4, you've got the proofreader, you've got the substantive editor, you've got like 5 editors all giving you advice, and you don't have that personal relationship with them. I can't answer your question though, which one I'd rather work with, because I'm going to tell you next year.
I was just going to say, connected to that, if you ever go to like a Remainders bookstore, Book Warehouse used to always sell lots of the books that have like a black mark on them that have just been like, we're not selling these anymore, so they're very cheap or something. You will note they are almost all big presses because they go through the process really quick. Oh, it didn't sell. Let's get them out of here somehow, right? Which, I mean, that has its upsides too. You still get readers who get your book for half price, but you don't get much of that money. But it's a very different model for, yeah, distributing books. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have only published through very small presses, and I feel like exactly what everyone else is saying, like someone who's entirely on Team U, and that relationship lasts long past the publishing process. I still sometimes get emails from my very first publisher. I published my book with her in like 2006, I think, and she'll be like, "Oh, I just read this book. It reminded me totally of you. You should totally read it." And she's still looking out for me and my writing all these years later, which is amazing. And I also think that there's sort of this, at least my experience has been that there's a sort of community that sort of forms around your book in this interesting way. Like I have at book launches, I've met like my cover artist, the person who copy edited my book, like the and the publisher's family. Like it becomes this whole community, which is a very nice feeling. And also they're not, they are publishing your book because they believe in it and they believe that it is saying something that matters, which is a cool feeling.
Yeah, for poets it's fun because we don't have to have a debate. There's no agents, there's no big presses that care about us. So we don't have to have the existential crisis of which path to take.
Get small or small.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Do we want extremely small or incrementally larger than extremely small? But when we're talking about those 2 options, the thing I was thinking of is kind of like, would you rather have a circle of 5 friends who you really love and feel closely connected to, or 100,000 Instagram followers, right? Like, both of those paths, like if you have a book that you give to your 5 friends and say, please recommend them to 5 more friends, that can result in a book that sells well. It's unlikely, but it's unlikely that any book sells really well, right? Or you can put it out to your 100,000 Instagram followers, and maybe that will go really well. But for me, and I think this is what lots of writers' path is most books do not become instant bestsellers. Most books, regardless of the size of your press, sell a small number of books, and then that's it, and you go on to the next book. And at the end of that process, would you rather feel like you were in this really intimate, loved, supported community or something else? And that's where I find lots of people end up saying, I'd rather be with a small press that knows me, that loves my books, that I have a personal relationship with. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with the other one as well. I just think that if that doesn't pan out, it can be a very hollow feeling at the end of that process, because it's been a much more corporate kind of journey that you've been on.
I also know some of my writing friends out there I know of who have had mediocre experiences with the small presses. But you know, I mean, it's. I think sometimes it's a bit of a crapshoot too. I like it. I think I got lucky with Tidewater. I also think that, you know, because it's an indigenous sort of story, it's also it's time and place, it's luck. And but I mean, I was right in there with the entire process, the whole editing thing, you know, right down to the book cover. Actually, my wife designed the book cover.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's a wonderful. I love it.
It's a great cover too.
Yeah, yeah. So that was a good thing about working with a small press, is that it's like every 2 or 3 days I was talking to either the publisher or the editors, and it was really, really intimate, and you know, we got to know each other. We got to, you know, shed some tears, scream and yell at each other. You know, we need an arc, Joseph. We need an arc. It's like, yeah, it was good. It was really awesome. But yeah, go ahead.
No, go. I'm about to end it, so this is your last chance. No, if you have a thought. Oh yeah, if you have a final thing, go for it.
No, it's not a final thing. I just want to cap
Oh.
off that.
It's not a final thing. He's just
No,
going to cap it off.
No, yeah,
There's
I
the
know, thank you.
distinction
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
No, that question around small or large.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't like how binary it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right.
And
Yeah.
I just wanted to make the final point of it doesn't have to be either or.
Mhm.
You can think of your writing life as a journey. You can approach the large publishers as much as you want. If they're not saying yes, smaller publishers will generally take time with new authors. And so they'll give you time to develop and put your work out there, and they'll give you chances that a larger press may not give you. So you can see your trajectory as working with a smaller press to a medium-sized press to a larger press. But I just want to say this about what the small to medium-sized publishers deal with is, like, they develop these writers and then they leave them and go to these bigger places, and that's very difficult for the small press. They have to go and find new talent, and they don't have the resources, the capacity to hold them. But also it's the author going and saying, well, no, I want to try this pasture. I just wanted to say that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Not capping anything off.
No,
Not
capped off. That's it. We've been capped. No, we are out of time, so we will be ending there. But if you have any more questions, I don't think anyone's racing out of the room. You can continue this conversation. Sorry, we don't have time for an actual question, sadly. But you can track us all down, and we can have an extension to the event right outside. We are out of time, but I want to thank the Word Festival for this event, and also the Association of BC Book Publishers of BC. Every time I have to decide if the book publishers or the BC goes first. And Read Local BC. Please do follow Read Local BC on social media, and sign up if you haven't already on the newsletter form that I hopefully should have gone around by now. There you can find ongoing conversations with BC authors, including many of the authors that you've seen up here today. Yeah, that's it. The authors, will you be at the signing table out there after this? Can you go over there? So that's, if you want to talk to any of these authors, go over towards the books. You can see Joseph finally see a real copy of his book. It's going to be very exciting. You can witness it in person. So thank you so much for coming. Before we go, can we just a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the festival, which it just keeps going.